Worldwide Technology has a research report called Security Priorities for 2023. Now, they've been doing these reports for a while, thus this show, and we've even talked about this one on security, but it recently struck me that for much of my career, security itself was the priority. And of course it is, but it's not good enough just to say we need good security, because that definition is, well, it's different for everyone, and security's never been a project that we're going to complete. There's always something that can be done, but we got to make decisions about whether or not we do those things. And as we look at the 5 priorities here, details matter. Security is a vast and an intricate topic with extraordinarily high stakes. And given the volume of information, prioritization like this becomes essential, especially when recurring threads indicate familiar points. Well, we did a show covering Priority 5. Brianna Sedaris shared her expertise on the rapidly evolving Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE market, warning of the risks surrounding conflation between SASE and SSE, which stands for Secure Service Edge.
The only thing I will say that is different is think of it as a pathway into SASE for if you choose to just pursue SSE, because SSE, not all OEMs give you that end-to-end, I would say, like analytical data if you don't have that A in SASE. So not being able to see the network component when it comes to your monitoring.
Specific data points may not be visible depending on your deployment decisions in this area. So there are consequences around the degree of visibility. Now, a similar threat exists in Priority 4, where we covered Identity and Access Management, or IAM. Jason Yee spoke to the inclusion of all devices, especially those involved in machine-to-machine communication.
It's still very important for us to control that and get, and more importantly, have the visibility over it to make sure it's doing what we think it's doing.
2 great shows already in our library of coverage around security priorities, featuring a common thread around visibility. Thus, today's show on Priority 1, improve visibility, validation, and control of enterprise data. And quoting from the research paper, a solid grasp of visibility, validation, and control will give security leaders a comprehensive view of application workflows and network traffic paths, as well as validation of data within the Central Management Database, or CMDB. We have 2 guest contributors helping us break all of this down. Matt Berry leads a team of security architects working the front lines with potential customers as a pre-sales activity. And his team partners closely with Jill Cochrane's consulting team, who are generally found on the post-sale delivery side. These 2 provide great compare and contrast points around this security subject. So stay right here as we discuss bridging the gap between assumed and actual visibility, plus the importance of relentlessly and continuously questioning the integrity and the completeness of your data. My name is Rob Boyd. Welcome to WWT Presents Research, accelerating results through the knowledge and the achievements of those who came before us. Well, all right, guys, it's time for another research report here, and we got some experts on security. I wonder if you could introduce yourselves. Start with you, Jill. What is it you do for Worldwide Technology, and what's important to understand about your background here?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm Jill Cochrane, Managing Director for the Security Consulting Practice within Worldwide. And basically, my role is to deliver services for this organization and to help your organizations really deep dive into concepts and challenges and architect solutions to help make your security practices more healthy and stronger.
Excellent. Thank you. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, pleasure to be here. So my name is Matt Berry. I'm the Global Field CTO of Cyber here at WWT. I represent a team of technical subject matter experts who focus on practically every domain of the security portfolio that our customers live in and breathe in on a daily basis. For many of our listeners, they're familiar with that golden pyramid of the people, the process, and the technology. And so between Jill's team and my team, we focus on all 3 of those. So while I may have very knowledgeable individuals who can go very deep in technology, Jill has very talented consultants and advisors who can focus on the people and the process and performing the assessments to really understand that delta between, where you want to go and where you are today.
All right, Jill, I'm going to start you with the first question, if you don't mind. High level, visibility. How does that relate to security, to this conversation? How do you define it?
So, Rob, I think visibility is really at the heart of all of building a really strong security practice, right? When I think about being able to visualize and see where my assets are, what my application inventory is, and how I make sure that I'm securing all of that wrapper around those products and services, it's vital to securing organizations. And so a lot of times there's thoughts around, well, if I have a CMDB, that's good enough. If I have, a central database full of my assets, that's good enough. And what we're doing and seeing in the industry is a thought process changing to incorporate not just a CMDB, but what other logging activities are taking place, right? So you're logging all of your events or your endpoint detection capabilities. Why not validate that all of that data is correlated to your CMDB as well? And I think that sounds a lot more intense than it is, because when organizations start to correlate data, they will start to see trends. And that's what I'm trying to highlight in this visibility space is what you want to look for is as much trending data as you can get to, because your anomalies then will help you detect threat actors in your environment.
You can't have an anomaly if you don't know what normal is.
Exactly.
I guess here as well.
And in order to have that anomaly and visualize that anomaly, you need to see everything. And so the goal is don't just rely on one tool, but rely on many of the tools that you already have deployed in your environment, cross-reference them, and show that as your holistic posture, right? And then look for those anomalies as part of that.
Is that as simple as you want to use different tools because they look at maybe a different part of the stack? They are located in different places in the network, and thus they're going to have unique perspectives that become additional color around what you're trying to decide if something is acting in a way that it shouldn't be? Is that the general
That's
idea there?
absolutely right. So you could have an endpoint detection tool that's specifically looking for endpoint anomalies. In the same sense, you'll have a firewall detection tool that's looking just at the firewall, right? In order to see a lot of assets, both internally and externally, you can correlate all of that data. It's already being logged, but now you're using that in a different aspect, in a different regard to build out this visibility component and be able to normalize your data to look for those anomalies.
Matt, I am curious what your impression is how well do customers understand the importance of visibility and the role that it plays in security?
I think the topic of visibility is it's a simple topic to understand, but it is a very difficult topic to comprehensively do well and to maintain that level of, end-to-end visibility that we as security practitioners really need to have in order to identify risk and track risk and hopefully, the end goal is to mitigate that risk. I think about, in the world of cybersecurity, I think of what Michael Jordan said way back when, that if you get the fundamentals down, the level of everything else you do will rise. So when it comes to visibility, it's one of those basics that that organizations need to do really well. As Jill was saying, you have these data sources that are providing telemetry from many different areas of your organization. So, from an endpoint security perspective, you may have 18,000 devices that you know about. From directory services, Active Directory, maybe you have 23,000. And still, again, if you look at your cloud infrastructure, you may have 9,000 assets in your cloud environment. So you're dealing with multiple different data sources and that need to be able to pull those together and cross correlate those to create a single viewpoint of what you actually have in your environment is critically important. I think the advantage of attackers really lies in the difference between what you as an organization have and what you as an organization manage. And there's a big difference between what you have and what you manage. And I think what's easy for organizations to, it's easy to fall into the trap of looking at what you manage and making the assumption that that is what you have. And attackers rely on that delta so that they can, carry about their TTPs and attempt to obtain persistence in your environment without you really being aware of it.
How do you know that you're watching all the data that you should be watching? Because it may look like it's a lot and it feels like you're getting all the answers you need, but I got to think that there's probably situations where someone could be missing or overlook something that is critical. How do we prevent that from happening?
Some of the challenge is making sure that you have defense in depth, right? So you don't just have one tool, but you have compensating controls to offset some of the
But
challenge
that's
and the risk.
visibility depth. You're saying that happens at multiple levels specifically? Because I understand the defense in depth from
Yeah.
if things get past this, we don't want to be, free for all.
Well, and that's
Okay.
why don't just rely on the CMDB, right?
Okay.
That's where the stance gets to. You're logging a lot of data on a lot of different technologies and tools that you already have today. I would consider that in my old role running an enterprise defense in depth strategy, because you're pulling multiple data sources to correlate and validate your health efficacy of those tools. And so, when you think about defense in depth, you have to think about it from the asset perspective as well. And are you capturing all the data that you need to feel confident? And if you're not, you're always looking around the corner for those additional sources.
Yeah. So, when we talk about visibility, in my mind goes in two different directions. So on one end of the spectrum, you have device visibility, visibility of your assets. On the other side, you have your visibility of your data, of where your sensitive data is. And so I think something, as enterprises are dealing with this diaspora of assets and of data, being in the cloud, being on-prem, being on laptops and phones, I think it's really important. As Jill said, you have that defense in depth, understand the complexity of it, but I think it also is important to prioritize what is the most sensitive data in your environment that you need to protect. So if if you work in critical infrastructure, global financials, insurance, if you're a regulated industry, probably a lot easier than for other enterprises that are not regulated. But having an idea not only of this comprehensive view of where my assets are, of where my data is, but also understanding the prioritization of what data is most important, what's sensitive to me. If you are a food manufacturer, that data that's really important to you that you need to maintain visibility of might be recipes, where you're talking about eggs and milk and flour and things of that nature. So I think prioritization also comes into this, as you mentioned before, Rob, just the complexity of what we're dealing with. There's no way that you can address this massive problem in one fell swoop. So at some point you have to prioritize and sort of figure out where am I going to, put the majority of my resources to, reduce risk, to get visibility in the short term, and then have a sort of a phased plan to, address the rest of the environment.
So, Matt, I think you hit it on the head in terms of prioritizing risk. We're seeing companies now prioritize and spend time prioritizing their high value assets, their high value data. And that in turn is leading a lot of cyber resilience conversations, right? Because when you talk about cyber resilience, you're really talking not just about, making sure that you have your data backed up in a secure location, but you're talking about full end-to-end restoring of services. And in the case of a hospital, how quickly can we get an ambulance rerouted to a new location if needed, right? Or how quickly can we get the med carts open? Those are real life and death situations that companies are now spending time talking through their cyber resilience strategy to say, my highest value software or hardware is here, and we're going to start recovering from this point, all the way from the data side, all the way down to the endpoint. And those conversations are so critical and foundational for organizations to start having and start leading the charge, because it will change the narrative on how they secure their environments.
When organizations think about risk and prioritization, it's very easy for that next step to say, well, what do I have in budget? And, and really the assumption is I need to see what I have in budget so that I can make a product or a solution acquisition in order to solve my problem. And I think that what's really important for our customers, and what Jill and I, both of our teams have been heavily engaged with with a number of different organizations is helping them understand, okay, before you have that knee-jerk reaction to say, I have a gap, I have budget, before you get to the point of saying, I'm going to buy something, really having that consultative approach where you look at what you have today. And in many cases, you're already more than half of the way there. We're seeing, financially being in a recession, budgets tightening, and I think the silver lining to customers looking at these visibility challenges is, in many situations, you have a lot of good technology that's there. It's just a matter of charting that course to figure out, how do I take all of these different sources of data? How do I bring them together into, one pane of glass? And I think that many times has more to do with the people and the process side of that golden triangle than it does simply, to focus on the next shiny solution that's out there.
Every research report has a number of repeated sections that I've come to expect, one of which is next steps. Now, there are just two in this particular report, and I want to paraphrase them and get you guys to add some additional color. The first one says to perform a comprehensive visibility assessment. What's important to understand here, Jill?
So I think it can be done in a couple ways. One is Matt's team has some pre-sales opportunities that they, work with clients and really talk through opportunities for visibility. We transition nicely into the solutions practice. And what we do is we sit down and we actually map data, right? So let's go in and talk about where your critical assets are, what's reporting in those critical assets. And to Matt's point, how can we bring those into a single unified dashboard, right? We want that visibility. We can use tools like Power BI or something that you already have on your platform, but we want to bring that data together and correlate it, and then start to have those critical conversations around, do we feel like we've captured everything from a visibility perspective? And those assessments really range from, understanding your landscape in the tooling world, and then understanding what APIs and what third parties and what applications you have on hand as well, because I will say third party plays into this just as much, right? You want to understand where all your third parties are. You want to understand how often you're doing third party risk analysis. And some of that does come into play. We had a company that had 3,500 vendors. They weren't aware of that number of vendors, right? And so looking at that, how do you even begin to prioritize risk around what those vendors are delivering on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and what access they have? So I think it's important for us to sit with clients and understand where they are, help them map some of this data together, and then make really solid decisions on what risks are important to them to lead them through the strategy.
Well, the research report also calls out just how complex our networks have become, which means visibility must be considered for multiple areas that we can't overlook. The data center, the cloud, or clouds to put it plural really, but also BYOD, work from home, big areas that we don't want to overlook, correct?
I think they certainly should be. Fortunately, I think that with the emergence of, SASE and SSE solutions, I think the ability to capture, just awareness of what is going on with that laptop or that mobile device, or that Apple machine that Rob has in his basement, that's connected to corporate assets. I think that ability to get awareness of what's going on is much more achievable than it was even, pre-COVID. Before the emergence of a lot of these SASE and SSE vendors, we saw that organizations would really need to hairpin their traffic through a data center in order to get, the inspection that they needed to comply with their security policies around risk. So I think fortunately, we've seen technology advancements occur such that even as we're dealing with this, this BYOD, I don't know what generation we're in now, not 2.0, probably 3 or 4.0. I think we actually have the technical solutioning to be able to get that level of visibility. So as customers are wanting to do those assessments to see, what is on my network, what is it doing, should it, it's a lot more achievable than I would say it even was 3 years ago.
Where does automation fit into visibility and in that part of the next step process? How should we view that?
Yeah. So, if you can imagine that triangle of people, process, and technology, I envision automation sitting in between, in the center of that triangle, that's connecting the people, the process, and the tools that you're using. And, I think that's really what the promise around SOAR tools were, the whole orchestration and automation of being able to, create workflows that would trigger based on, new events that were being seen. So yeah, I really see the automation as being sort of the fourth piece of that puzzle. Um, Simply because, as we were talking about before, Jill, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but as we're talking about the enterprise landscape getting more and more complex, you can no longer rely on your people to constantly be looking at a dashboard or for running a report. And really there's that need to rely on that automation to take many of those mundane tasks and, offload that to, an orchestrator, so that your people who, are really the valuable assets who should be monitoring your environment can actually look at, and be involved in investigations, or being looking at important data that's been collected through orchestration. So you're using them in a more effective way.
I couldn't agree with you more in terms of kind of the evolution of automation living inside the triangle. It's more critical today, I think, than ever, with the workforce shortages that we're seeing on a security um, practice, and a holistic, global view of security challenges. The need for automation to be baked into almost every tool, technology, or people process that we have is more important than ever. And how we do that is take a very collective stance on saying, okay, what are those low level tasks, those repeatable, achievable tasks that can be easily replicated via an automation solution, and start there, right? It's not you get to automatically reduce headcount by 50% going to automation. It's a process and a journey to make sure that you get every piece of the puzzle right. And part of that is, back to the visibility portion. You want to see all those assets, you want to correlate that data so that when there is an anomaly, an automated, flag is quickly raised, and you're
Yeah.
not having somebody to have those eyes on dashboard at that moment that that issue occurs. Instead, it's an automated generated alert that calls someone or pings someone or sends a text to, this person. And I think that's the evolution, and that's the intersection on where we're at, and being able to detect and really respond quickly to events and issues as we see them.
So when we work with customers and the topic of automation comes up, it's easy to, fall down the proverbial rabbit hole, Alice in Wonderland, and you're thinking about all the crazy stuff that can be done with automation. You add into it, the buzzword, I'm going to say it because it hasn't come up yet, chat GPT and all the open AI, ML buzz, and controversy that's going on right now. But, really, I think where the value comes in looking at automation is in very, very basic tasks that are so mundane. Even as we mentioned early on, if you have multiple different sources of asset inventory across, your EDR platforms, your Active Directory, your, cloud assets, being able to take all of those, disparate sources of data and normalize the data and cross correlate it. I mean, that is a very low level type of automation that can be done that provides a significant amount of value. So just to call out that as organizations are thinking about automation, even some very large, Fortune 100 organizations, as they're approaching automation, what they're prioritizing are those very basic, mundane tasks that, when completed correctly and consistently, really have a force multiplier effect, as opposed to, the other nirvana that you can think of leveraging an automation that can automatically identify a risk and respond to it. Both are important, but, those very basic types of automations that you can do at scale in order to, pull together different sources of data to actually provide relevant insights so that the smart humans that are on your staff can more rapidly make a decision, especially when there's a security breach, and response time, mean time to remediation is is of the essence, it makes them more effective at their jobs.
Almost every research report that we've been working around this year that you guys have published includes automation to some degree, usually in what is one or more of the priorities. And there's actually an automation priorities report, which breaks down priorities within automation. And I do feel like both of you guys are hitting on this, because one of the things that I've learned, especially when it comes to security, is I feel like anytime you can eliminate, because you mentioned two words, what was it? Doing things correctly and doing things consistently. Those are the two things that get messed up most often with humans. And so if we have humans doing things that could be done by the machine, man, give it to the machine, to oversimplify it a bit in the sense, because the idea is that you will get, computers are good at doing repetitive tasks. That's exactly what they're famous for that. And it's also why they're a security issue. But I love that in terms of just, because you need to leave the stuff that requires that human intuition and gut feel and the training and experience that our customers' teams have to apply those in the right areas. But if they're busy copying, data from one interface to another, that's probably not best use of their time. And it's and eventually something's going to crack and break.
Right. And a question that's being floated not only in the security world, but just, in every facet of society is, oh my God, is ChatGPT going to make my job obsolete? And I feel like as security practitioners, I'm not condoning ChatGPT right now. It's still experimental, but let's say 3 or 4 years down the way, as organizations either, invest in their own large language model, or, those get commoditized and integrated into products. That is the very best news that we have for security practitioners, because all of a sudden now you can take the very mundane tasks. They can be done very, very well, and the systems can learn and get better at doing those tasks. So now your individuals who are, even, young people, like I have a son who's 15, and, if he goes into the world of cybersecurity, by the time he's 25, he's not going to be doing the things that I did 20 years ago, working in CSV files and getting really good at writing VLOOKUPs and all of that. Like, he's actually going to be able to, make decisions and inform decisions and do things at a higher level than I think what many of us sort of came from back in the day, the very mundane.
How hard is that to get started in terms of asking you guys for help? What is your preference? What have you seen? What would you suggest?
We really pride ourselves in our methodology that is baked into us from the very beginning. It's the whole idea to outcome that we say. So, very early on in the process, we connect with our customers, and we really want to understand, what are the outcomes that you're actually looking to drive towards. We have customers who come to us and say, hey, what is the best SASE solution or SSE solution that I need to implement? Or, what is the best data discovery product? And we're happy to, consult and assist in those different areas. We have a $800 million lab in St. Louis that we leverage our ATC to do a lot of crazy technical stuff. And I know that's been addressed sort of ad nauseum, probably here on these calls and on other reporting.
Yeah.
But really, understanding from our customer, okay, I understand that you're asking around data discovery, but what outcomes are you looking for? What is the board asking of you? What are your mission critical mandates for your organization over the next 12 or 18 months? Like, what are you beholden to? And in most of those conversations occur over either a 45-minute briefing that we have on a given topic. Our briefings are really intended to be less about me talking for 45 minutes and more about us dialoguing for 30 minutes after sort of a state of the union, and us providing sort of initial insights of what we're seeing across the different industry verticals. So it begins with the briefing and then quickly goes to workshops where, these can potentially be, before an assessment. So we spend a longer period of time with our customers, sometimes virtual, sometimes on premise. It differs now in sort of a post pandemic world, but, spending a little bit more time sharing the insights of what we're seeing, hearing back from the customer, and really gaining that relevant data so that when we get to the point of doing an assessment and engaging Jill's team, we have a very clear picture of what the pain points are, what the success criteria is for the customer and the customer's own vernacular, and then leveraging Jill's, wonderful team of consultants to be able to, apply a very proven methodology around those pain points and outcomes and really, drive towards that in a very, systematic way.
The great thing out of Matt's organization and flowing into ours is that we try and partner and work as one unit. So when they're having those, 45-minute working sessions or solutioning, we're at the table helping the client understand, maybe they don't need to do an assessment. Maybe they need to go to their board and get funding or find funding for opportunities to display the lack of visibility that they have in their organization and why it's very important. We help shape those messages from a board perspective. We have, former CISOs on our practice that have done that before and really dig in at that space, all the way down to hands-on keyboard. So if you want a dashboard bringing together all of your tools to show some vulnerability challenges, to show some visibility issues, we have folks that have done hands-on keyboard. So it's trying to meet the client where they are in terms of, the evolution of where they see the visibility challenges that they have in their organization.
Well, I like what I hear from both of you saying is that we can be transactional. Some people approach us in a transactional manner, and we do our best to get them into more of a consultative approach because we can provide better advice, even based on a simple transaction you think is all you need. You might be wasting your money. You guys are, or wasting your time. Two very important things we never have enough of. But you guys are always pushing for how can we dialogue, as Matt said, back and forth to understand, because this show that we do here, this is broad strokes. No one is going to watch this show and really truly identify the unique things that they need to do. But if we can help educate and shed some light on some things, I think we get someone in the door virtually or physically with you guys to then understand, well, what is your environment and what it is that you're struggling with, and ask the questions back and forth that'll then guide the responses you give, because your responses are going to be unique to every situation, I would imagine. Anyway, I like that. You're consistent. You guys are on brand. Approved. I like it. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Matt, Jill. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Worldwide has such a wealth of resources, it can be impossible to try and, even to simply list them. Sure, I mentioned workshops, briefings, and hands-on lab access in most shows, and you should definitely consider them. Yet the fastest way to gain positive momentum is by working with experienced individuals who can help navigate these specific hurdles that you face while striving towards your unique goals. At the very least, don't overthink it. Reach out and ask for help. They will engage as much or as little as needed. Good security requires a balanced approach across people, processes, and technology, and the order of those three words, not an accident. I encourage you to read the entire research report, Security Priorities for 2023. We just covered Priority 1, Improve Visibility, Validation, and Control of Enterprise Data. There are currently 2 other recent videos covering Priorities 4 and 5, and you'll find all of these resources on the platform. My name is Rob Boyd. Thank you for watching.